Hey you guys, welcome back to the channel. It's me, B. Riley. Sorry for the delay for the last couple weeks. Summer is always really crazy, especially when you're doing camp and you're getting ready to open your classroom again. So apologies for the delay. Today's the day, and I can tell you right now, I don't think this is going to happen in one day, but let's see. Let's go ahead and throw a timer on it. How quick can we go ahead and refinish this Chickenbacker that I've got on the table right here, which is a good start off for like a good project guitar. I've already done some modifications. We've replaced a pickup. We've fixed some wiring that was pretty troublesome for minute one. And if you've seen the previous episodes that we have on this one, you've also seen that we've dressed the frets and made them a little bit more civilized because they were pretty sharp on the way in. But anyway, we are burning daylight, so let's go ahead and get to it. We're going to start taking this thing apart right now. Okay, first thing we've got to go ahead and focus in on is getting the electrics out of this guitar so that we have less obstacles to deal with. We have less of a chance to damage anything that might be ruined by sandpaper or by moisture or anything like that. So go ahead and desolder from the potentiometers the leads going to the neck and bridge pickup. On this one, the third pickup on this guitar, I've actually made into a dummy pickup. I'm not going to be using it for anything, so I didn't see the need to have it, so just clipped it and put it back down. Plus the factory pickups from the Chickenbackers are pretty not good, so you're probably going to want to replace those if you are interested in doing any improvements to yours personally. Just something to keep in the front of your head. All right, so we've got everything apart on this and pulled all the electrics out of it. And you might have noticed I left the tuners on the top. And the reason that I haven't pulled those is a couple different reasons. I'm actually not going to paint the headstock. I'm going to kind of do one of those 70s Gibson vibe kind of repairs where the finish on the neck stops halfway up. And in order to get it to where you're not going to feel it, where your hand is sliding up the neck, instead of just having it do a straight line here, we're going to have kind of a diagonal tape line. And I'll show you guys what we've got going later on when we get it. Hopefully it comes out the way that I want it to. One of the great things about a refinish is if you're doing one of these and you've got a natural finish like this, you really don't have to put a lot of work into it. Basically, all you have to do is scuff this so that you have good adhesion, and then you could spray right over it with a good bit of taping. For this, I am actually going to hit this edge really hard. And the reason is that it's a little too stern. The radius is not sufficient enough. On a 360, you would usually have a much more gradual radius. And also, we've got enough meat in that corner, so I can get into that a little bit, soften that edge without worrying about burning through or creating any type of structural lack of integrity. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to cruise out to the garage and hit this with an orbital. And before we strip the finish, the objective is to kind of reshape that radiused edge along the top and just kind of do a little bit of cleanup work. There's some spots where the finish has some runs, and I want to wet sand those and get those really clean. So this way, when we are buffing back the Charcoal Gray Metallic later on, we're not seeing too many waves or inconsistencies with the finish. Anyway, let's go to it. Dustier out here, looking a little bit more my age. Okay, we're done with our orbitaling. We're actually going to start using hand sandpaper, so I'm going to start off with 320, and I want to hit those edges so that you get that good smooth edge because even though you're using an orbital and those are really good at leveling spaces, they're also good at making ruts. They act really fast, so you got to keep them moving. But I always hand sand afterwards, and also because you want to go with the grain. This is going to help clean up the good, you know, wood and give you good grain visibility in the spaces where you do have breaks in the paper. All right, so here's the deal. We're back and it is the next day. Didn't obviously get through it all in one day, but we're gonna see if we can get through it in 24 hours. I know that's a bit of a cheat, but we're gonna go that route anyway. But it actually brings me up to probably one of the more important things that if you're a watcher of the channel that you've heard me say. And it is oddly enough one of the most simple things, but it's something that we as people who work on music and work on the art that we use to make the music, that we work on the instruments and things like that, is that sometimes we kind of turn into very large kids and we refuse to acknowledge the moment in which we know on some level, either very high in the mind or on a very basic level, that we're too tired to continue working. And it's something that we always push past. And that's kind of an American thing that I've realized over the last couple of years. There's this, this idea that it's good to be exhausted. And I grew up with that concept. I am a flagrant workaholic. You guys should probably understand that about me. I have been told by my bosses, sometimes at work, to go home. That you're too sick or you're too tired or that you just deserve to go home. And we have to be careful that our loves and our passions don't become, you know, the ball and chain, that we can allow that to happen. So one thing that I've really tried to focus on over the last couple of years is making sure that when I get to a level of work in which I'm satisfied for the day, that I am free to call it right then and there. That I would rather do the work when I am inspired to do the work and when I'm doing my best work and when it's coming easiest, than versus trying to schedule it. And the reason that I'm talking about that is that last night I wasn't doing primo work. I could feel that I was tired. I could feel that my hands hurt a little bit. But after feeling that for a little bit, I went ahead and hit the brakes and I put it on a kibosh. And now we're going to go ahead and get started today. The quality of my work has not leapt forward because of some new knowledge that I found. The quality of my work has leapt forward because I'm doing it strictly at the times where I feel like doing it. And that has made such a monumental difference in the quality of my work. So just something to keep in the back of your head. Anyway, we were talking about guitars. Let's go ahead and get back to that. Here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be wet sanding this thing right now. I've already started wet sanding it, little bits here and there, kind of last night, once again, as the inspiration struck. And that being said, we're going to go ahead and start wet sanding the back. Now, just a couple suggestions for the wet sanding. Start off with a 400 or a 600. You really don't want to be hammering away on this stuff with 800. You'll clog every piece of paper. Make sure you're using the wet stuff, so this way you have a little bit more of a buffing agent, an emollient in there. It minimalizes scratches and also keeps the dust minimal, because you remember what I looked like yesterday. I don't want to look like that twice in a week. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started with that and then work our way up to about 600, because this isn't the top coat. We want a good bond between the base coat and the top coat, so we don't want to really go any higher than 800. At that point, the scratches become micro scratches and you just don't have the significant bonding, and you also don't have a high rate of absorption and an increase of surface area that aids the drying. So you'll get pools of wet spots that'll really stay damp and stay soft for days and days and days, and maybe not even kick off the right way. So that being said, time to get to work. All right, you guys, so here we are on day 3. So day 1, that isn't gonna happen. Unfortunately, I had a bunch of shows stack up on this weekend and some other sessions. My schedule is just a train wreck right now of just gaps and overfilled spaces. So unfortunately the timeline is out the window, but that's okay because we've had a whole 16 hours since we've shot this thing to be able to wet sand it now. Now typically I wouldn't suggest wet sanding so soon. Lacquer requires a bit of time to kind of shrink down and come to a relatively final state of curing. So if you wet sand too quick, it's going to texture again slightly and kind of haze over, and then you're gonna have to wet sand it and buff it again, and you might be losing a lot of material then. So basically at this point, the stage that we're at is we've got color on it. It's real thin, so we're gonna have to be very careful when we're sanding, especially around corners. So my suggestion when you're wet sanding is start off with the lightest grit possible, as long as it's still biting, and then go ahead and just start moving around the deck or the back of the guitar, and go by feel, don't go by look. Your hand is gonna pick up a lot more than your eyes would be able to pick up as far as being able to differentiate spaces in which there are still scratches that could come out, or in which you've got a good sanded surface that you can start buffing to get that depth out of the color. Anyway, time to get going. Okay, so this is where we're at right now. We have done a bit of a buff, but we're gonna go ahead and have to hit it again because we still have you know, some texturing in the surface and everything like that, especially around like here where we came in thinner. Anywhere that the poly remained, you don't really have to wet sand all that much because the poly stabilizes the lacquer as it kicks off. Basically acts as its own isolation coat, so you get a good you know, sheen off of it right out of the box, so to speak. You don't have to wet sand. But with these, I like to take it down to bare wood when you're refinishing these. I always start off thinking I'm gonna just go ahead and give it a scuff and then shoot it, and then I always wind up doing bare wood, and the reason is because when you do bare wood, you get the grain highlights. You'll actually start to see them right about here by my thumb. You know, basically where the grain is drawing inward and the open pores are drawing the lacquer inward, and you're getting these kind of these impressions in the surface. And happily, I'm seeing a lot of manufacturers allowing this again, because this is something that you would see on any Gibson from the 1950s, any Fender from the 1950s, any Supro, anything like that, because that's the type of tech that they were using, and also it's the type of finish that they were using where it was very thin. I'm really happy to see a lot of manufacturers allowing this to be a choice now, because for about 30 years it was, you'll take what we've got. And when it came to Fender, that resulted in really thick finishes that I feel impeded a lot of the resonance of those guitars. So I'm really happy to see now Gibson and Fender doing a lot of satin finishes or matte finishes, which are basically just nitro finishes in disguise. So it's really cool. Anyway, let's go ahead and buff this a little bit. We are going to be using Meguiar's compound. There are different degrees for this. Some of them are more harsh, some of them are more fine. This is the one that I'm using. It is really cheap. It's inexpensive and it works a treat. For the quickest results, you're going to want to use a buffing wheel on a drill. But if you're like me, I like to give it a hand pass first. And the reason is because there are spots on this finish where it's a little bit thinner. And I want to just kind of get a good gauge. We've got the grain impressions. We've got a good soft set of contours around all the edges. I kind of like, it's usually indicative of something that's been hand sanded versus just CNC popped out and then given a quick once over with like a, you know, a dual action or something like that. So very pleased with the results. The tape lines are not perfect, and you know, there are thin spots, and there are thin spots that I like. I always like a bit of arm wear right about here. You know, I always like that spot to be its thinnest. It seems to bother the inside of my wrist the least. You can actually see right there, it's all red. I had a show last night, and the way that I guide along the top, I want a smooth surface there. So just something where, you know, you're making it your own. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's done. And it's a Chickenbacker. You know, it's not a Rickenbacker 370 or a 360. It's not a Roger McGinn model or anything like that. I know I pronounced that wrong. I have a funny accent. My bad. But the thing is that, you know, it's not perfect. It's good enough. And right now it's good enough. I like it plenty. Feeling really good about it. We're going to have to let this lacquer kick off for about another month or so before I can really buff it and really get it clean. But I'm not that hung up on it. So we're going to go ahead and start reassembling this thing. Give it once more over with a polish, and then start putting it all back together. All right, guys, so there is the update on the Chickenbacker, the Thunder Chickenbacker, the one that I'm, for some reason, putting money into and putting time and putting emphasis into. And, you know, it's just kind of an update. Obviously, the one-day thing didn't work out, and it turned into a multi-day thing. Any of you guys follow the Instagram know that I had a lot of rehearsals over the last couple of weeks, and I've had a lot of shows, and they were fun as hell. It was very warm at one of them. Actually, it was very warm at both of them. So unfortunately, I got backed up. That and work kind of, you know, got on top of my schedule. So I'm hoping to return to one a week or one every 2 weeks. But at the same time, I'm kind of the mind that even if it takes 3 weeks to do a video, if that's what it takes to do that video, then that's what it takes. You know, so we'll just go that way. And hopefully you guys are patient with me. And I appreciate your patience between the videos. As far as this one, how this one's come along, we're running out of time now. Obviously, refinish is a really time-consuming project. You're talking about a complete take a part of a guitar and stripping it of its outside finish and then refinishing it again. And there's multiple stages where you have to wet sand in between, and that really takes a lot of time. So can you do it in a day? Yeah, totally. Have I refinished guitars in a day? I absolutely have. I refinished an SG for somebody about 10 years ago, and I started this thing probably at about 6:30 in the morning. I was a little bit more ambitious then as far as with my scheduling, and that thing was wrapped by like 5 p.m. I mean, wet sanded and ready to reassemble. But then it comes back to the same problem. Lacquer constantly cures, which is why we like nitro. It checks and it falls apart, and it kind of goes through stages, and it gets vacuum sucked into the grain and shows all the intricacy of the wood and all that sort of stuff. And that's why we like it, but it does continuously cure. So if you actually wet sand lacquer, nitro lacquer, I know Gracie's from Madison's Music, you can do that. You can literally wet sand like 2 or 3 hours later without gumming up paper, and you'll get a really great result. The only problem is in about 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to notice that it's kind of, when you get really up close to it, it's almost wrinkling in texture. As the lacquer kicks off, a lot of the solvents continue to evaporate and the material continues to get thinner. And as it does, you're going to lose that sheen, and you're going to have to wet sand it all over again. So your best bet is this. If you have to, if you're in a bang rush like I am, and I just wanted to kind of throw it together and get it done because my bench had been getting really cluttered, then by all means. But know that you're going to have to take it apart again, and the next time you tear it down, at least tear off all the stuff that's front facing, all of the hardware on the front. You can always buff the back and the neck later on. You don't have any obstructions, but with the front, just be aware that you might have to take it apart, wet sand it, and buff it again. But when you do, you'll be happy because the results is really fantastic. On nitro, when it's been hand rubbed nitro and it really starts to show you know, the character of the guitar, it's just a much more enjoyable experience. Anyway, that's all we got for you guys this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Loving the input coming in, and you know, on all the different videos and everything like that, so keep it coming. And you know, give me some input what you guys are looking for, because like I had said when I first started the channel, this is more or less just me kind of filming what it is that I'm doing anyway. But if there's a specific project or maybe something that's really giving you a headache or something that you are not comfortable fixing just yet, let me know and we can do a video on that. Anyway, hope you guys have a wonderful week. Do enjoy what's left of your Sunday if you've got it, depending on when this video drops, maybe the Monday or Tuesday night following. And don't forget, be as loud as possible, plug into something, play. And, you know, don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and take some stuff apart, because remember that the better that these things play and the more that we identify with them, the more we're going to play them, the more art we're going to make, the more music we're going to write, and the better the world shall be. Anyway, see you guys next week.